What's up, fam? I'm sorry I can't be with you guys on the very last day of class, but I'm here with you in spirit in this tiny little box, and I'm going to walk you through my presentation. FYI, this is like take 25, and I have walked through my presentation 25 times already. So if I seem a little dry, I'm going to try my best not to be dry. But anyway, so I want to explain to you why I chose this form of presentation over other things, and that's because A, I did not have any more energy to write any more papers, and B, I needed to synthesize my learning in a way that felt really practical and real. And since I've been wading through a lot of muck this quarter with my own beliefs and teaching philosophies and my role as a teacher and my role as a global citizen, I figured that this would be a great way to do it. And also, like, I've been using mind maps a lot this quarter, and this is kind of like a bougie mind map, and I don't know, feeling it. So we're gonna see how it goes. I feel like my biggest change in thinking over the quarter is that I feel much more grounded now. Instead of having all these ideas of like equity and like my convictions just kind of swarming around my head like a nebulous bee storm thing, I feel like I actually have my feet on something solid. And to celebrate that, I made my PowerPoint Prezi of things that I feel really solid and great about. Yes, so I'm going to disappear. I'm going to have to just listen to my voice and be without my beautiful face. But yeah, let's jump right in. All right, let's see if Prezi wants to behave with me today. So my first point is naming my convictions, and this is something that I have since learned to value this quarter. And I think that naming my convictions is really important because it just kind of really grounds me in actualizing like what my teaching pedagogy is, what my passions are, and things that make me feel like I'm being an authentic teacher. And so number one is no one in my class should ever feel silenced, and I think that Makaguchi would agree with me. We've all had that experience where we feel silenced in a class, and at least I'm assuming that we all have. And I don't think that Makaguchi's the principles of value, that beauty, gain, and good, any of those can exist in a situation where a student feels silenced. And if we want to create a valuable classroom, a valuable learning environment, then it just doesn't work fundamentally to have someone feeling silenced, and that's just not how I roll. So that is one. Two, if anyone's experience is being invalidated, something needs to be addressed, period. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be me. And I think that that's probably one of the biggest things that I've learned this quarter, through that beautiful facilitation by Elmo and DJ on Rocking the Boat. It doesn't, like, obviously if an experience is being invalidated, something needs to be said, but I think that it's very valuable to have students or other people in the room work through it before I decide to put my superhero cape on and save the day, especially since I'm in a place of power and authority in a classroom setting. And I have a presence about me that fills up a room. I think that it's very important for me to be mindful of how much space I'm taking up and make sure that me being an intervention or like a force that's, you know, being equitable and, you know, righting the wrong and being just is actually what's best in that situation. And of course, there are going to be times where things need to be addressed, and it will be me, of course. But I do think that having it in the back of my mind that I don't necessarily need to be the only person saving the day is something that's going to be really helpful for me in the future. My number three, my classroom needs to reflect my students' experiences and identities. Students need to be themselves when they walk in. And we did see that with Mitchie in that when he was talking about the trial. And that was an experience that the students collectively had about not being able to eat in class. And then true learning happened as a result of that when they got to lead it themselves. And Michi was kind of out of the equation. And So I think number 3 can be translated into curriculum like that trial, but also like in the decor in your classroom, obviously, in the words that you say, in the text that you read, just knowing that students' experiences and identities need to be there in all forms and aspects is something that I feel very passionate about. And finally, share strategies with students so that they are comfortable navigating systems. That kind of goes with number 2, if you squint. But I think that now that I've worked through all of these strategies, which I'll talk about later, to navigate systems, it would be an injustice of me not to share those with my students in some way or another, because I only have them for 9 months, and then they go off into this big beautiful world and have to navigate all of that yuck. And if I know these things and they don't, then I feel like I'm kind of harboring these gems, and I'm not sharing information that they need to be critical thinking, active members of society. And I mean, I'm going to be dead probably sooner than later. And having these babies that go out into the world and use these strategies may help us in our current times. And so these 2 little sub planets over here, power and no need to be defensive, are kind of my reasons as to why I think that naming my convictions is so important. There is power in naming your convictions. It puts words to your feelings, makes you feel more grounded. And so by actually just physically typing them out, it gave me an actual practical view of what my classroom will look like, and gave a name to all of the feelings that I've been having. And to further illustrate that, I have a couple of quotes. Your true character is revealed by the clarity of your convictions, the choices you make, and the promises you keep. Hold strongly to your principles and refuse to follow the currents of convenience. And I don't know who said that, but Malcolm X said, power in defense of freedom is greater than power on behalf of tyranny and oppression, because power, real power, comes from our convictions, which produce action, uncompromising action. Straight up, Malcolm X, straight up. But no, for real, just having the clarity of your convictions helps you with your character, straightens out who you are, and also gives you power, and helps you with your action, which we get into in a little while. Oh, we're gonna zoom in, zoom me. Cool. So no need to be defensive. I don't know about the rest of y'all white people in the room, but I constantly feel like I need to prove that I care about issues of equity. And by naming my convictions and having them on paper, it's kind of freeing, and not I don't need to prove that I care about them, because that's what's driving my actions in the classroom. And one of my goals for the quarter was to evaluate communication and its implications. And I think that being defensive is a barrier to communication. And I think that communication is probably one of our best shots at making real change with our current times. And so before I named my convictions, this is a gift that Merritt did not tell me how to fix. But this little girl opens a cabinet and a bunch of clothes fall on her and she gets knocked over. That's just kind of how I felt before typing my convictions out on paper and really actualizing them. And then I said that already. Great, so we can move on to Pick Your Battles, which is a baby of the last planet that we talked about. So once I committed to my convictions, it was much easier for me to become mindful of the strategies that I want to use in certain situations. And these are the strategies that I was talking about that I wanted to teach my students later on. If you haven't read Nieto's Beyond Inclusion, Beyond Empowerment, highly recommend stealing it off of that Canvas site and putting it on your nightstand until you read it, because it was very, very cool. But the strategies that Nieto talks about are empowerment strategy and recentering, and also that beautiful facilitation that DJ and Elmo walked us through with those case studies, using humor, delaying response, naming an issue. Those are also strategies that I feel like are much easier to use now that I have a starting point. And Molly and I have had many conversations about sticking to my no, so then what's my yes? We've also talked about this in class. And so in order for me to figure out what my yes was, I decided to do a few self-exploration pages from the journal that Merritt and I used in our facilitation, like the one that was like, name 5 things that bring a smile to your face immediately. And so after I did a few of those, I decided to make a few ground rules for myself, who I am as a person, and it kind of gives me a goal to strive for. These are different than my convictions because my convictions are based in equity and things that I fight for. These are more of my values and what I need to do to be an authentic human being and feel like I'm being authentic to myself. Which is also something that I've been struggling with over the quarter. So I'm not going to read these out to you, but Michaela did give me number 10. And so these are things that I can return to when I'm unhappy or I'm feeling resentful and see if I'm violating any of these ground rules. And then maybe I can reassess my behavior, the choices that I'm making, and making sure that I'm actually being authentic to who I am and what I value. Um, Moving on to care and love in regards to my pedagogical practices. So I'm realizing that all my pedagogical ideas, like where I'm coming from when I actualize like what my philosophies are, is that I am grounded in a deep love and care for my students. And healing is a word that I routinely use when I'm reflecting on what's important to me through teaching. And so I saw this when I went back through all the work I've done in the quarter and like all of my reflections, and I constantly see that word healing. And I think that that kind of shows what my classroom goal is. Like at my core is like for students who necessarily don't have a place of refuge, that maybe my classroom or my teaching could be something like that to them. And so I related that to Makaguchi's value, because Makaguchi's beauty, gaining good really embodies what I value in my classroom. He values students like I do, and he also values learning, and he created a system or explains a system that makes sure that students are receiving a valuable education. And so that film that we watched in class with the weeping children models Makaguchi's value and love and care for students, and for that healing differently than I would do it. I can't imagine myself standing in a circle with students weeping about our dead relatives, but you never know. Check back in 5 years, we'll see what happened. And so my last point is feedback. And I think that that's one of the main things that I've really taken away from this course is the feedback that Molly and you guys have given me. The first piece of feedback that I received in this course was, instead of focusing on what you don't want, what do you want to gain? And this was really, I guess I don't know how to spell warder, don't pay attention to that. But it's been helpful to me thinking about why do I focus on what I don't want, like the space that I take up. I don't want to take up too much space. I don't want to talk too much. So just kind of refocusing that, and what is it that I'm trying to gain by not doing certain things. And so that goes into helpful feedback. Thank you guys so much for your feedback on those little post-it notes. I have been working on my self-confidence in teaching, and in order to do that, I've tried to focus on my strengths. And I think one of Mitchie's downfalls was that wavering sense of self. So I looked through all the feedback that you wrote me on those post-it notes, and I found common threads that you guys thought were my strengths. And so I'm not going to go through those, but these are them. And you know that I'm going to write these in my teacher planner for next year for my internship. On the days I feel like I'm going to quit, that I'm not good enough, I'm going to read these, and you guys are going to be with me, and I love you. But change over time. I was very insecure in my teaching abilities at the beginning of this year, like to the point where I didn't think I could do it. And then even at this beginning of this quarter, I'm feeling like I didn't really have what it takes. So over the course of the quarter, hearing all your guys' feedback, reflecting on my practicum experiences and my Get Real log, and working through some of the content in my independent choices have really helped me actualize my pedagogy and really see myself as a teacher in a classroom eventually one day. And this strong sense of self seems to be essential in bringing value into the classroom. So just to share some of my practicum experiences, we did this thing with mandrakes. When I talk about Harry Potter, so there's this line about Mandrake shrieking in Romeo and Juliet, and the students like didn't get what that line meant. And so I brought up Harry Potter and the Mandrakes, and I asked them like, you know, what happens when someone hears them screaming and all that. And they responded more enthusiastically in that discussion than I have ever seen them. And I think this might be because I was very comfortable. I was loving that I was talking about Harry Potter, which is something that I love to talk about. And I was sharing like a sense of camaraderie with my students because we were like engaging in a shared experience that we all had had. And I was being authentic and I was grounded. And here's another experience, which was fencing with noodles. So there's lots of dueling in Romeo and Juliet, and they use sabers, which aren't like swords; they're those like needle things in fencing. So to understand what was actually happening in a dueling scene, I decided to watch the Fencing Olympics on YouTube, which if you have 20 minutes to kill, it is very funny. But so I watched the Fencing Olympics and I used volunteers to show like parry and other footwork and saber techniques that were mentioned in the script so that they could actually visualize what was happening. And after that, students practiced in partners like fencing with yardsticks and pool noodles. And I actually got like those expo markers, and you like stick we've all made the expo marker like chains where you stick like the cap inside the butt of another marker. You make like a big long stick. We use those too. Students were laughing. They were having a great time. Mr. Worthy looked like he was going to have a heart attack. It was great. But they remember that scene in Romeo and Juliet and they talk to me about it all the time. So, I was sticking to my ground rules using Makaguchi's like Beauty, Gain, and Good. That was such a beautiful moment. And simultaneously, I was teaching in a way that felt really authentic to me. So that was a win. But I think that's basically all. Oh my God. I guess it's just going to decide to freak out at the very last minute. That's all I've got. So yeah, I really appreciate you guys listening to me ramble for 16 minutes. I love you guys. I'm sorry that I'm not there, and I will see you all tomorrow at the barbecue. And yeah, I love you guys. Have a great summer if I don't see you. I'm sure that I'll see you. I'm going to show up at your guys' house. All right. Bye, fam.